In this lesson, we're going to go ahead and analyze some pictures of famous actors, or, just very stereotypical looking people, let's just say. There is a lot of discussion about beauty nowadays, and we're not going to get into that, but we should understand what all the fuss is about and what kind of ideals people keep talking about. In general, since we work in a advertising medium, we're sort of slave to those needs of the market. So, what's pretty now might not be pretty in 10, 20 years, like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, bigger women were considered beautiful, and then today skinny women are, finger quotes, beautiful. So there are things to take a look in these trends, and that's what we're gonna do now. So if you take a look, we've got two fairly recognizable people. We got Mr. Brad Pitt, which all the women seem to agree that is a very good-looking man. And then we have the singer and actress, I guess, though debatable, J-Lo. I hope that after the first lesson, it's fairly easy to see why the skull is so important here. Look at Brad Pitt's chin, and look at how super square it is. Look at that. It even rounds out. It's so big. It's ridiculous, right? It's really big. So let's just say that's 1 point for me. So I'm right on that regard. And look at that square chin, really big, really nice. And then if you take a look, you can easily see where his zygomatic goes, since it's a lot bigger down here, right? It's more or less over here. So also fairly big. His nose is a little bit bigger than J-Lo's, but not by much. And I don't know if he's had anything done to his face. That is the thing nowadays, that you need to be careful. You don't know who's done anything to their faces, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he hasn't done anything. You can see that his nose is fairly short if you compare it to her nose, which is fairly long. See? It's really big if you compare them in sizes. And I've roughly scaled the heads to be about the same. But take a look at her profile of the jaw. Look at how smooth that is. Look at that. She has a little bit of a kick on the end of it, but it's not nearly as drastic as this here that you're seeing, right? So much softer, much rounder. She breaks the mold a little bit because she has a really big chin if you take a look. Maybe Brad Pitt has a small chin and she has a regular looking chin. We don't know. In any case, take a look at how delicate and small her ears are compared to Brad Pitt. Look at that. A little bit bigger, a little bit soggier. It's a weird shape. Hers, beautiful, right? Nice, and round, and purty. The eyebrows are something that is actually a big deal when trying to talk about male and female differences. But they can vary greatly. In this case, it looks just fine to have a little bit thicker eyebrows, but women tend to have thinner eyebrows. Again, thinner, softer, smaller, everything is going to be more feminine. Okay? Her nose isn't that small, so that's more of a male feature. That's something to keep in mind, so that's -1 point for me. Well, not really, because like I said, people are different. And different combinations of facial features, they just work sometimes they don't. So it doesn't look necessarily bad upon inspection, but now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it, right? So you know that J-Lo has a big nose. Okay, thicker lips. Look at that. Women, when they have thicker lips, they tend to be considered more attractive, as well as bigger eyes, just more opened eyes. Take a look at how small those eyes are on Brad Pitt. So we're delving into a little bit of the territory of what's attractive, what's not attractive to nowadays standards, let's just say. I'll always say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that should be the rule here. But for the sake of argument, for the sake of just studying what we know to be, what people consider to be beautiful nowadays, what are those things that people look for in a face, right? Look at how large the forehead is compared to his, not so big. You can just see by the size of the line that I'm drawing. If you transpose it to that, you'll see what I'm talking about. So that's because his forehead isn't necessarily ending here. It's actually up there, but his head he has the eyebrow, right? And then it slopes back and then bends. So it looks like it's not there. So his hairline is actually covering part of his forehead. So it's not that ridiculous. I'm just, trying to illustrate why it's so important to keep in mind the facial differences in the skull structure. Now, I have right here a profile picture of Ben Affleck, another guy that people consider to be fairly attractive, or just a face that you recognize and say, okay, that's a good-looking guy. So what can we see here if we compare it to this lady? Well, take a look at how big his jaw is. So let's just make a new layer here and just draw it out. Look at how big and square that is. And you're going to start to see a trend that you don't necessarily think about. Well, it's the comic book trend of that is a manly man. The manly man has really sharp features, big jaw, big chin, and obviously facial hair. Facial hair is an actual big deal when it comes to male and female. And you may just be like, oh, of course it is. That's really obvious. Well, you wouldn't think so. Because for example, I have really strong beards. If I shave, I look like I'm 16, right? So it plays a big part. And if you want to make your character manlier, never hurts to add some more facial hair. Okay? Take a look at the profile. Look at how sharp that line is. And look at how soft that is. Hopefully you're beginning to see the trend. Small chin, big chin. Okay? Nose not so much, right? The nose can be small, could be big, it depends. But look at those big eyes. Look at the smaller eyes, right? So this tends to be the rule here. Women tend to have the bigger eyes, or at least the more attractive, finger quotes, women have the bigger eyes. Look at how thick the lips are. That makes a big difference. Men tend to have very thin lips. No matter what you think, attractive or not attractive, it's just how it is. So keep that in mind when sculpting. Now, I'm going to turn off this lady here. I'm going to show you another one, and you can clearly see what I'm talking about as far as the nose being more delicate. It's just a nice series of very well-constructed lines. If you look at the male nose, it's not quite there. It's small here, then it has a little cut, then it comes in, curves, goes in, goes out. It's not nearly as elegant as just this beautiful shape that we have here on her nose. Take a look at the spacing between the nose and the lips. On males, it tends to be bigger than it is on females, as well as, again, thicker lips on this girl, but she has a fairly big chin. Look at that. Exceptions to the rules, always. But you can clearly see how nice and round that face is and how big and square his face is. So he'd be a good Superman, right? Looks like a Superman face. And these are what the comic book artists tend to exaggerate. It's just these features, right? Look at his forehead. Big sharp line on the outside here of that brow ridge into a curve, right? She won't have that. Women tend to be much softer over here. So that's a look at the major differences from the skull being moved on to, actual pictures of people that you recognize, or, just stereotypical things that nowadays are considered beautiful, etc., attractive. Let's go ahead and in the next lesson actually take a deep look at the female face and then at the male face, and then we're going to move to androgynous faces before we skip into Photoshop. So bear with me, this is important. I'll see you in the next lesson.